In order to receive her husband's favor, the woman arrives early at the hotel, dressed in sexy lingerie, to prepare the room. She expects to spend a wonderful night with her husband after a month of not being intimate. However, when her husband returns, he shows indifference and disgust at the sight of his wife. He claims that he has an important meeting later. And although the wife is very disappointed, she quickly dresses and prepares to leave. However, she is unable to zip up the back of her dress and accidentally falls onto the bed. The husband looked at this and suddenly appeared to be very disgusted. In order to make his wife disappear from his sight as soon as possible, the husband had to go up and help zip up the zipper. Then he once again urged his wife to hurry and leave. When the wife returned home, her eyes were full of sad tears, looking at the beautiful video she once recorded with her husband and son. They were so affectionate at that time, and now the wife could only find a spiritual comfort in such memories. Miju's family is proud of her, because Miju, who comes from a humble family, married into a chaebol family. Unbeknownst to her, her father kept praising Miju at the opening ceremony of his restaurant, claiming that his daughter had a husband who loved her dearly and a mother-in-law who treated her like her own daughter. Facing such words from her father, Miju could only force a smile. Her father had no idea that Miju was not well received in her in-laws' household. Her husband, the president of a conglomerate, lived and worked in a hotel year-round, and shows no concern for Miju as his wife. In order to comply with her mother-in-law's orders to have a second child, Miju has to go to the hotel every time. Whenever Miju says the wrong thing, her husband immediately shows his displeasure. Miju can only immediately apologize meekly and leave tactfully. From the outside, Miju's marriage into a wealthy family is the life that all women dream of. But for Miju, this home is like a prison. When the mother-in-law was interviewed, she was asked how she treated her daughter-in-law and the family. The mother-in-law said she would have to ask her daughter-in-law. The reporter saw Miju arrive and immediately pulled her over to ask the question the mother-in-law had not answered. Miju could not afford to say the wrong thing about such a sensitive issue. She was trembling as she said that her mother-in-law was perfect, while watching her mother-in-law's face. Although the mother-in-law was full of smiles throughout the interview, showing her approval of Miju, her face changed on the way home. Miju, who is kind by nature, did not understand what she had done wrong. She thought she had done a good job in the interview, and had not mentioned any of her mother-in-law's shortcomings. At that moment, her secretary sitting in front of her reminded Miju that she should not have looked nervous at her mother-in-law during the interview, because the reporters, who could read between the lines, would definitely make endless speculations. Miju suddenly understood and hurriedly apologized to her mother-in-law, but her mother-in-law then told the driver to stop the car. Miju immediately understood that her mother-in-law wanted to kick her out of the car. She prayed that her mother-in-law would abandon her here, because there was no way she could get a taxi here. But this was exactly what her mother-in-law wanted. In the end, Miju could only helplessly accept the reality in front of her. Fortunately, she soon found a bus stop, and finally managed to get on the bus back to the city. On the bus, looking at her bloody heel, Miju's heart was both sad and aggrieved. At that moment, a handsome guy next to her kindly handed her a wound sticker. Miju had not yet had a chance to thank her husband when his phone rang. He asked if she had received her mother-in-law. Miju did not dare to tell her husband about her, and lied that she was on her way home with her mother-in-law. The handsome man on the side looked at the serious liar Miju, and did not know that their fate had also begun at this moment. That day, Miju received a call from her younger sister saying that there was a major problem at home. Miju had to quickly bid her mother-in-law farewell, seeing her daughter-in-law leave in a hurry. Her mother-in-law asked her secretary to find out what had happened at her daughter-in-law's home. It turned out that Miju's brother's lover had come to the door with their newborn baby. Due to the long delay in handling family matters, Miju returned home very late, and her mother-in-law directly ordered her not to return to her parents' home in the future, and let her recognize her status as the daughter-in-law of a chaebol, and then told her about her brother's illegitimate child born outside of wedlock, and said that if the matter were to spread it would tarnish the reputation of a chaebol family like her own. And it was then that Miju realized that her mother-in-law had been spying on her. Although she felt unhappy, she could only bear it silently. When she returned to her room, Miju was very happy to see her husband, who had not returned home for a long time. She thought that if she told her husband about her grievances, she would be comforted. However, not only did her husband adopt an indifferent attitude, he also thought that her brother was an unreliable man. Miju vented her pent-up anger for the first time. She blamed her husband for looking down on her family. That day, when Miju was lying to her mother-in-law outside, the man who had given her wound stickers was listening to her clearly. Horan felt that the woman in front of him was really a master of lying. But Miju's chewing ice cubes in such a cold day caught his attention. After finishing one cup, she was not satisfied and was ready to buy another. Unexpectedly, she found that she had forgotten to bring money because she came out in a hurry. However, Horan kindly helped Miju pay the bill at this time. Miju then thanked him again and again. Horan then blamed Miju for not listening to him, and not applying ointment to her bloody feet, which is why they haven't healed yet. Upon hearing this, Miju suddenly remembered that the strange man in front of her was the one who had handed her a wound patch on the bus before. She sighed that this fate was truly miraculous, since they were so destined to meet. Miju didn't be a stickler for propriety, and gladly accepted Horan's warm help once again. What followed was a remark from Horan that struck close to Miju's heart. He said that chewing ice cubes on such a cold day was only for when one was depressed. Only when she is depressed. At that time, her mother-in-law called. Miju had to end the conversation with Horan and return to her cold and uncaring in-laws' home. Horan always felt a sense of familiarity with the woman in front of him. One day, he was invited by Miju's husband Taejun to have his father's surgery. The only thing that Miju feels warm at home is to miss her son's belongings. In order to follow her mother-in-law's wishes, she wants to give birth to another child with her husband as soon as possible. Every night, she prepares herbal medicine for her husband to drink on time, but her husband has no intention of cooperating because he blames Miju for the death of their son, and because of this, their relationship has become as cold as ice. What's more, her husband thinks that Miju is desperate for a second child because she wants to forget the dead child. This makes Miju speechless. She misses her dead son so much that she volunteers at the place where her son died every day. Unexpectedly, this time she has taken someone else's child as her own. Seeing that the child is about to have an accident by crossing the road, Miju desperately protected the boy, but in Miju's eyes, the one who got hit was her son. In the hospital, she lost control of her emotions, anxiously begging the doctor to save her child, and kept shouting her son's name. However, this scene happened to be seen by Horan at work. This scene suddenly made him remember why he felt familiar with Miju. It turned out that Miju's son was the one who Horan failed to save and passed away. Horan's heart was full of self-blame. He thought it was his arrogance and conceit that caused him to fail to perform a checkup, which led to a misdiagnosis and a failed operation, and that he had killed Miju's son, although his father emphasized that if an examination had been performed first, the child would likely have died in the emergency room. Horan still thought he had killed the child. Looking at Miju, who was distraught at this moment, Horan's heart was still full of self-blame and sympathy for Miju. Fortunately, the boy was fine, just a little scraped. The boy's mother angrily rebuked Miju. "Do you think my son will die like your son? She'd better not go to the school to volunteer again in the future." Miju finally recovered from her recent outburst of emotions, and knew that she had hallucinated again. But the boy's mother's words pierced Miju's heart. Her husband witnessed everything just now, but he didn't want to come forward to comfort his wife. Instead, he left with a look of extreme disappointment and turned away. Miju finally fainted from her heartache. Horan quickly went up to Miju and supported her. He had spent his entire life saving lives, because he believed that he had misdiagnosed and harmed Miju's son. It had become a pain that he had buried deep inside his heart for the rest of his life. But Horan chose to evade his responsibilities in order to continue being a doctor. Today, seeing Miju again, who was in such pain over her son that she had lost her mind, Horan also felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart as he watched Miju, who was in a coma. Horan kept apologizing to her. When Miju woke up, Horan saw that she had no money and lent her the bus fare home. Miju only thought that she had once again owed the doctor a favor, and said that she would definitely repay it in the future. Feeling guilty, Horan told Miju not to worry about it, but Miju did not know the meaning of these words, and insisted on leaving her phone number to thank Ji Jian again. At home, her husband was preparing to get rid of the belongings of their deceased son. He believed that if they didn't get rid of them, Miju would never be able to get over her pain. Only by clearing out these things can they live well. Miju wants to persuade her husband not to do this. Her husband persuades her to be more open-minded. Looking at her son's photos, Miju weeps in pain. Her son will never come back. She cannot keep her son's spirit imprisoned in this room forever. Only by letting her son go can her son find true happiness. Miju longs to return to the time when she and her husband were once in love. She tells her husband that she will try her best to send her son away. Her mother-in-law also always hoped that Miju would become pregnant again, but unfortunately she learned from the fortune teller that her daughter-in-law simply did not have the affinity for children, which meant that she would never have children in this life, which was hard for her mother-in-law to accept. Miju did not know her own miserable fate, and still vowed in front of her mother-in-law that she would definitely try her best to give the family a child as soon as possible. Although the words of the fortune teller were still echoing in her mother-in-law's mind, but she still hopes that she can really give birth to a child, as Miju said. Back in the room, Miju was surprised to see Secretary Lee sorting out her husband's clothes for his business trip. Miju was very unhappy, but she didn't dare to get angry. She could only smile brightly in front of Secretary Lee and swear her sovereignty over her husband. These are all things that a wife should do. Although Secretary Lee left, she was full of resentment. Taejun returned home drunk and depressed. When the mother-in-law saw this scene, she blamed Miju for it, and said that she, as a wife, let her husband feel depressed. Miju could only bear it silently when she was inexplicably scolded by her mother-in-law. She wanted to take this opportunity to take good care of her husband, but was hurt by her husband's cold attitude. Taejun even confessed that he resists Miju and makes her suffocate. Hearing this, Miju suddenly woke up, so she began to try to change herself. Early in the morning, She prepared the clothes her husband would wear today, promising that she would work hard to change and bring their life back to the good old days.